Afternoon, Brad.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. It said my speaker wasn't working. All right, so I'm glad you're on. You'll have to keep me honest during this investment kind of deal analysis session.
Yeah, my inspection class the other day, I think I probably could have tested without even attending the class. It was I made the mistake of opening my mouth at one point to help answer a question, and then the instructor was picking on me the rest of the time.
Oh man, yeah. Some of these classes, I've heard that about the GRI too. A lot of folks will take that, and it'll just be a rehash of kind of what they just went through in real estate school. So sometimes it's hit or miss. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and jump in because I think that there's probably going to be a lot of conversation about today's topic. So before I get started, welcome Ryan Miller and Travis Grisso. These gentlemen are the latest to join White Rock. So welcome you guys. Appreciate you showing up. So we do this every Thursday at 1 o'clock. And so today is a little bit of a departure from what I normally do. Normally, this is the week that I'll go a little bit deeper into a training topic, like working your database or how to work with for sale by owners. And so, but today I really wanted to take some time as we kind of tee up next year to at least expose you guys to some of the more common ways as alternatives to make money in real estate. And so I think that some, if not a lot of you guys, have expressed interest at one point or another to invest. And so today I thought I would go through some of the more common ways that you hear about to make more money from being a licensee or just in real estate in general. Some of which some of y'all have done. Some have never done some of these things, and I kind of threw in one or two that I like as well. And at the end, I'd like to analyze a couple of deals. And so anyone that's ever done this before, please keep me honest. Let me know if you have different thoughts. But let's just kind of get into this. So why you got your real estate license? So a lot of people tell me, they want to help others purchase and sell a home. So traditional retail real estate. Some want part-time income. Nearly all of us want to be in business for ourselves. Yep, got that box checked. But I think that there is an underlying reason why we all got into real estate, and that's to make money. And so there are a myriad of ways to make money in real estate aside from representing traditional buyers and sellers. Okay. And this is by no means a definitive list. I've actually left some stuff off because I didn't know a whole lot about it. But today we're going to go over some of the more popular ones. Okay. So, do I need a real estate license to do this? Okay. The answer is it is going to be far better to have one than not. And I'll tell you why. Because investment real estate does not have, or commercial real estate just in general, does not have their own MLS. So you have to subscribe to software like Crexi or CoStar or LoopNet. And that is kind of where a lot of the listings are. But a residential agent will get tapped on the shoulder from a client that wants to list a piece of commercial property and they have no earthly idea how to do that. So they go to their go-to, which is put it in the MLS. And so if you don't have a license, you don't have access to the MLS. And I'm telling you that the MLS is one really solid way to find just stupid deals because residential agents that don't do this a lot end up listing stuff that, probably is fraught with errors and really probably doesn't belong in the MLS, but that's all they know how to do. So let's go through some of these ways. I'm going to go through each one, but the list is, you can do a traditional buy and hold for single family homes, townhomes, or condominiums. Okay, so that's rental real estate. You could buy and flip. Okay, so you're going to buy a piece of property, and in this model, I'm just talking about single family homes, and you're going to rehab it, and you're going to resell it. You could join an investment group. So there are several of them out there, but what the concept is that you are pooling your money with other people to go in on deals. And the deal volume is usually greater than what you could get on your own. I'm going to go more into that in a second. But there are groups out there, some more reputable than others. You just got to kind of do your homework. The other one is be a developer. Okay, so you could create ways to build housing in some form or fashion. Think outside the box. I'm not necessarily talking about single family alone, and resell it, right? Kind of like a builder. You can invest in land. And I'm going to go into examples of that in a moment. You could do Airbnb. Okay, so that is renting either investment property, a vacation home, or your own home, either the full home or part of your home, and act as a hotelier. RV parks. So these are not just for vacation destinations. A lot of people look at RV parks as alternative housing. And so there is absolutely money to be made there. Self-storage facilities. So goes without saying, we as a country, consumers, we have a lot of stuff. You won't have to shoot a rock very far to hit someone that has a storage facility or has a unit in a storage facility. So there's money to be made there. Mobile home parks. So I'm going to go into this more in a second, but do not shy away from mobile home parks. There is a lot of money to be made. And I want you guys to think about the very real fact that there is a distinct shortage of affordable housing in this country, especially in Texas, because everyone's moving here. And it is all over the news for the past 2 days about the sticker shock of rents and rent renewal increases. So this becomes a very appetizing way to make money and still do a service to people that can't find housing. JC, do you have something?
No, Matt Sanchez was waving. I was waving back.
Oh, okay. Okay. And then apartment locating. So I'm not going to go a whole lot into this, but for those of you that have done or found vacancies for some of your clients in apartment complexes, they pay well. They typically pay better than a single family home landlord. So that is another way. And then lastly, I'm going to go through the neighbor app one more time. I've been through this before, but I'm going to go through that again. So let's talk about each of these real briefly, then we'll analyze a deal. So buy and hold. So this is long-term investing. So, typically the intention is to create rental income while allowing the home to appreciate in value. Okay, so the end game is really to, when you sell it, because the rental income typically is not enough to have you quit your job and move to the Bahamas. So we'll talk more about that in detail when we go through a deal. But make no mistake about it, you are now a landlord. Okay, and so there's lots of tenant law and landlord law that you have to be aware of. Fair housing things you have to be aware of as well. I never found it to be true that tenants were calling me at midnight with an overflowing toilet. Maybe I was lucky, but no one ever did that. I think the idea is to set boundaries and kind of establish the rules of engagement. And being a landlord is actually not that big of a deal. What you hear more often than not is that I have a long-term renter in my home. I have maybe increased the rent a couple of percentage points each year. I never hear from them. They make their own repairs. They pay like a slot machine. And I go a driver out there maybe once every 2 months just to make sure everything is good, and everything is good. That is a lot of times what you hear. Now, you got to make sure that you're doing your due diligence with regards to who goes in there, but that can be your life as a landlord. So the issue is, or the trick is to buy it below market value. Right? So easy for me to say, because those deals are tough to be had. So if you're old enough to remember the recession of 07, 08, 09, didn't get better till 2012, really. That's when I bought a lot of my properties, and I was getting them for $75,000, $85,000. They were foreclosures. They were falling off the trees. And I did very well when I sold them 5, 10 years later. But this really is the linchpin of your success. It is to be able to buy below market value, even if your intent is to create rental income. Okay. And so the idea, you need to make improvements, maybe. It's rare that you wouldn't, but any buy and hold property, you're typically going to have to make improvements so that it is rentable. And then you need to research the rental rates in the area. So I would actually put this first. And so the best, what I found to be successful is that I didn't do the shotgun approach. I focused on an area that was within 10 miles of where I lived, and I just waited for deals to pop up. And the reason is because like any neighborhood expert, you become familiar with what is an appropriate sales price and what's an appropriate rental rate in the area. And so to know your rental rates when you're talking about buy and hold is hypercritical, because you may think that you can get X for it and you really can only get Y for it. Okay. So again, you cannot really do that without a real estate license. Okay. And then you rent it out. Right. And so this is 10 years ago. I never had issues with renting out homes. And that is even more the case today. And so all I did, even when I had a license, was I put a sign in the yard and managed the call volume that way. I did not ever have to put it in the MLS and pay another realtor to bring the tenant. Okay, so if you're a licensed realtor, there is really no reason to do that if you can manage the process appropriately. Okay, so things to consider. So know the eviction process. So like they always say, begin with the end in mind. So you are likely going to have to evict someone either formally or informally. So what do I mean by that? Well, you can tell them the writing's on the wall and we're going to go to eviction if you don't pay. That's typically the most common reason you evict someone. And 9 times out of 10, they'll leave. But if it has to go to court and go through the eviction process, that is a 3 or 4 week process in Texas. It's not that expensive, but you're losing another 4 weeks of not getting your money. And so you need to know what those laws are and what the process there is. Similarly, no tenant law. In Texas, the leases are really skewed towards the landlord, which is opposite of a 1 to 4. Those are typically skewed towards the buyer or the consumer. Okay. And then next, know how much you could sell it for. So I think it's pretty fair to say that we're probably at a point where there are a lot of landlords out there that saw dollar signs with the market conditions several years ago and may be tired of being a landlord and just want to unload it. Well, that could be you. And so you want to know how much you could sell it for. So inherently, I will tell you, I've mentioned this before, that assets like townhomes and condominiums do not have a great resale value. Okay, so I would steer clear of those, but single family homes obviously do. All right, so know that you're going to make your money when you buy the property. Why? Because of what I just said. Know how much you can sell it for. Okay. Now, in today's market, it's difficult to not buy something at the top of the value spectrum, but ideally, that's kind of what you want to do. All right, and then know the formula for cash on cash return. So this will be the first time that I kind of talk about this. So think of it this way. If you have money to invest in real estate, you could take that money and put it anywhere. And if you didn't want to do any work whatsoever, you could put it in a mutual fund or with a financial advisor, and you're pretty sure to get 7 or 8% return on your money. And every year that number is going to grow by 8%, and that money is going to grow by 8%, and that compounds over time. Well, the same thing goes for real estate. So any amount of money that you're going to have to spend on this asset, you want to get a return on investment. So as a real brief example, if you spent $50,000 buying the home and rehabbing it to make $25,000, that'd be a 50% return. That is phenomenal. You want to kind of understand what that number is for you. We're going to analyze a deal in a second, and I'll tell you where I check in there. But you want to make sure that you're putting your money into something that is going to net you a better return than had you done nothing but give it to a financial advisor. Okay, so buy and flip. So this is short-term profit, right? So a lot of investors are in and out of there in 90 days. Between the time they sign the contract to the time they close to the time they rehab it and get rid of it. Okay, so you want to buy below market value, make improvements, resell at a profit, and then repeat. And so things to consider: know your lending options. So JC, for an investment property, single family home that is not your primary residence, at a high level, how much are you expected to put down?
At a high level, on average, about 20%.
20%. Okay. So this ain't no FHA loan where you can only put down 3.5%. And then the interest rate is also going to be higher, and that is going to be roughly what, JC?
4.5.
Okay. So if it's your primary residence, it's probably, in round numbers, it's probably 3.5. So you're going to pay an extra point or more if it's an investment property. Okay. So know your lending options, know how much profit you could make. What is your break-even point? Okay, so you've got to ask yourself, if you buy this home and you have to put down $50,000 to buy it, and you got to put another $25,000 in to rehab it, what could you sell it for? And what is the difference between those two numbers? So is it worth it to get a profit of $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, whatever it is? You're going to have to be comfortable with that number. Now, I would direct you back to the cash on cash formula as well. So if you're going to get a $15,000 profit on that same $50,000, that's a 30% return. So that's really good. But it's usually not that cut and dry. So because of my next points. So know how much things cost to renovate. You need a reliable crew. Okay, you need essentially a general contractor or someone that has a crew to be able to go in and assess deals and tell you how much it's going to cost to do certain things. And then lastly, expect surprises. Okay, I mean, you don't know what's going to be behind the drywall or underneath the foundation. If you see a listing that says investor special, there's a reason for it. And so you're going to need to bake in extra money to make that thing worth your while. Okay. Jeff, any comments so far? Or Matt? I understand Matt's on too.
I know, like a lot of the deals, that we did, you say you don't know really what you got until you get the wall opened up or whatever. That's true. I mean, sometimes stuff will telegraph as foundation problems, and you open the wall and it's actually termite problems because the drywall's cracking because there's no stud supporting it anymore. I found that out on a house that we did in Little Elm a couple of years ago. We ended up basically reframing the front of the house. So that wasn't such of a hit for us because me and my foreman did it. But if you had to pay for that, that would have been a pretty large expense. So,
Right. And psychologically, to that end, if you're not used to writing those checks and running this thing like a business, it can be a gut punch because
right.
There's a big change that needs to happen in mindset with regards to thinking about making a payment like that personally, if you personally had to do it on your own home, and doing it with the end game in mind to get a profit. And so, to your point, the things that you're mentioning are gut punches because it's nothing that's going to add any value to the home.
Right.
I mean, you want to be writing checks for paint, carpet, upgrades into countertops and things like that, things that are going to get you more money. And so that's what I mean by expect surprises.
Yeah, the big thing when I see people being unsuccessful with investing is when they get emotionally attached to it. This is a business. I mean, this is sticks and bricks. This is not your dream home. This is not someplace that you're going to retire to, or there should be no emotion tied to it. One thing that we used to do a lot when we would renovate a house is basically look at everything else around it that's sold. And that would basically be our rehab plan. Whatever features were in those homes, that's what we would do.
Yeah.
So it was just methodical. I mean, there wasn't any emotion tied to it.
Matt, anything to add?
Yeah, I know Jeff. I've known him for a while, but he's right on point on a lot of this stuff. And what we've done in our business as far as like fix and flips and rentals is we systemized everything. Don't try and look at the HGTV and customize every house and do all that. If you look at every single one of our houses, it's the exact same paint, exact same flooring, exact same appliances. Everything's the same. We reduced our waste. And whenever I go to a property with my project manager to say, hey, this is what we're going to do, it's really, okay, we're opening up this wall, we're enclosing the garage, we're adding a bathroom, and just configuring that. Other than that, I don't tell him colors or anything else. He just runs with it. Also to note, we actually moved away from doing so many flips into doing rentals. And the reason for that, I looked at my whole business and we've probably done between rentals and flips, probably about, or not rentals, between wholesales and flips, and we did a lot more flips and wholesales, we've probably done over 150. And it kind of really disgusts me when I look at how many we did. And it's just like, I wish we had done those all as rentals. Which now I look at projections and I look at a very minimum appreciation over 5 years. I look at 5%. And I know historic from 2009 to 2019, we were between 7 to 8%. So I use a lot of stuff where I buy stuff in the front end with lending and then turn around and refinance all my cash out or even get a little bit more. And then also know the tax benefits. The tax benefits on buy and holds are huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And depreciation is what you're referring to?
The depreciation and also, for instance, a house, like say it's worth $250,000 now. If I take a 5% appreciation in 5 years, it's going to be worth about 320. If I financed it on a 30-year note at 3.5% interest, and I financed 85%, then I can get that paid down to about 190,000 in 5 years. So I can do a cash out and pull out $42,500 after fees, tax free.
Yep.
So and still retain that asset.
Outstanding.
Good. And Brad, I'll point out, kind of jump on what Matthew was saying. Excuse me, but in the properties that I've done as well, I've found the paint I like. I find everything I like. I went and bought a ton of it. It's all in a storage unit, so that got a great deal on it, bought in quantity, and all the places have the same color, same flooring, everything. And but I'm also a private money broker, and so the customers that I've loaned money to as well, the number one mistake is, as Jeff was saying, they get emotionally tied to the house. They see something on TV, they get in there, and then they just start spending. And the deal is spend as little as you can, because you get the best return you can, because it is a business, like Jeff said. And but as far as upfront, too, on cash is you make your money when you buy it. And for instance, like with my lending, I'll lend, we'll lend 100%, even including closing cost, up to 70% of the aftermarket value. So, or after rehab value. So, that way, no money in, and you sell it, and it's an infinite return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll go one step further on the getting emotionally attached. Folks think that it's just going to magically work out. It's got to work out, right? So that can be dangerous too. So the next one I mentioned was joint investment group. So these are groups or companies that charge a buy-in fee, typically in exchange for deals and expertise. One of the more popular ones based here in Irving is Lifestyles Unlimited. And you could, with them, you're investing in either single family or multifamily. If it's multifamily, the hold time is typically 5 years or more. So what they do is they will buy an underperforming asset, that being an apartment complex. They have their own formula for what they do to it to improve it. And so when you're improving value on a commercial asset with multifamily, you can do one of two things. You can build more units, which is impossible, or you can raise the rents and just make the experience better. You could add amenities, things like that. So same thing goes for a hotel. These things happen with hotels all the time. And so at least with Lifestyles, you are buying in, but the deals are pretty fast and furious. But you're one of like 150 other people that are buying into the deal. And the exchange is that you're getting experts, and the project has its own LLC. It runs like its own separate company, and the money is used to buy the asset and make improvements. And then theoretically, over time, 4 or 5 years down the road, it's put on the market and sold, and you get your return. So this is somewhat akin to just giving your money to a financial advisor. Some people love this. Some people don't, because they just kind of want to roll up their sleeves and be involved and see cash flow. But there are tons of these out there. So things to consider. There is an expense to buy in. Question is, could you do this on your own, like Matt? I mean, Matt's been doing this for years. And so at some point you kind of outgrow the mentorship, but and then lastly, you still need cash to invest in their deals. So just kind of keep that in mind. But they're out there, and it's not just single family or multifamily. Every real estate asset has their own kind of group like this. All right, so you could be a developer, right? Buy land and develop for housing. So Matt's in the middle of a project like this too. But this could be single family homes, multifamily, RV parks, self-storage, retail space, rentals. We actually have a realtor whose husband bought and continues to buy land in, I want to say Gainesville. And he has partnered with a manufactured housing company. So think mobile homes, but secured, but still kind of prefab homes. And he is putting manufactured homes on all that land. And so I don't know how much the land costs to buy it, but he's starting to really gain traction. And so, it was kind of touch and go on the first one, but the first one led to a second one that led to a third one. And when all is said and done, I mean, he's going to exit out of there with a lot of money. So, but some things to consider when it just comes to buying land and being a developer in general is the zoning. I mean, the zoning and the local ordinances are going to determine what you can do and if you can do any of it. And then it goes without saying, is the thing in a floodplain? What are your lending options? And it may be such a high dollar endeavor that you may need other investors. So, but this is, this being done not just by folks like D.R. Horton, and there's no reason why any of y'all couldn't do this.
One thing too, Brad, with the zoning, that also applies to ETJs. So
yeah,
that's something to consider too. I know a lot of investors have bought land in the county, and then all of a sudden they find out, ooh, yeah, I can't do what I want to do because subject to the ETJ of the adjoining town or whatever.
Right, and to go along with that, I mean, something that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, this RV pad slash land that I bought, was having a heck of a time getting electricity. I finally got water. It had a septic system, but that's kind of the same conversation. I mean, it's one thing to be able to do with it what you want, but do you understand the cost involved in getting electricity and just general utilities? The cost and who provides that. And so if it's on county property, that's a different conversation than if it's in city limits.
Brad,
yeah,
kind of like what Jeff was saying, we ran into that too. A business partner of mine had got some land and we were going to do development over there. We didn't know, we found out it was in county ETJ. So we went over and met with county, and then they said, okay, with what y'all want to do, the development you want to do, you cannot annex into the property. And annexation is where you become part of the city and you can use city utilities and everything like that. We found out we couldn't get annexed in because of certain, regulations. And so we had to move over to try and do septic, which is with what both you and Jeff were saying, know your utilities and all your costs. And, we thought we had a plan, we thought we were going through. And then the septic company, once we got to like phase 2 and 3, just killed the whole deal. So
I believe it. Yeah, I've been there.
So do all your due diligence when doing this stuff, because it can kill a deal real quick.
Yeah, and to Matt's point, I mean, whether it's city utilities or a septic system, it can be done, but a septic system is 16 grand and up. I mean, and expect those costs to go up because of the supply chain issues and things like that. So it's one thing to want to do it, but there are some very time-consuming and oftentimes expensive things that you have to do in the due diligence phase to even determine if you can do with it what you want. So,
yep. And I'll throw in there, we had someone in a similar situation as Matt there, where they wanted to annex, and they figured, hey, we're not in a big hurry here because they got a great deal on the property. So it took them a year, but they continued to meet with the city, got to be friends with the mayor, got to be friends with a lot of people on city council and so forth. And they basically sold the city on the fact that, hey, if we take this area and fix it up, it's going to improve the community, it's going to increase values, it's going to increase taxes, and so forth. And boom, it took them a year, but they got it done.
Yep. Well, and this just goes back to what I've said before, is that I didn't tell you it was going to be easy. I told you it was going to be worth it. So, I mean, there's a lot of muscle that you have to put forth on these things. But man, I mean, if you're already in the business of real estate, you've got to be thinking about these opportunities. So, moving on. So land, you could buy and hold it and hope to sell it to a developer or someone else that wants it. But you could also create things like an RV park, storage, mobile home park, parking lot. You could lease it out for farm and ranch purposes, create a campground. But the similar things apply. to being a developer, you got to consider zoning, local ordinances, and the cost to clear the lot and add utilities. So Airbnb, so this is one of my favorites because it's so flexible. And so if you want to learn more about this, they have seminars on this from hosts all the time. So just go to airbnb.com, click on become a host, and sign up for a webinar. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version here today. But this is a tremendous opportunity to what I always describe as bend down the ground, pick up a handful of dirt, blow some life into it, and start making money. You know, if you're like me, my wife and I are empty nesters. We have an entire second floor with 3 bedrooms, a full bath, and kind of a common area that we could turn into an absolute gold mine. You know, and so the next level there is spend some money on a rental property and do the same thing. But it is a tremendous return on investment. And I know, Matt, you're starting to do this too. When you talk about a $2,000 a month income on a renter that's renting it out, you know, 12 months out of the year versus charging, I don't know, $129 a night, and it's 75, 85% occupied. I mean, you don't even need to do the math. It's just stupid money return on that. So what's the trade-off? The trade-off is that a renter, you got one person in there that you can kind of keep an eye on. You know each other. You did a background check, and there's some stability there. Short-term rentals, not. And you've got to turn into a hotelier. It's going to be a lot of turnover, a lot of wear and tear on the asset. But like Matt has said, all this stuff can be systemized. And I'm telling you, if you've not researched Airbnb, you need to do that because it can be a huge moneymaker. I mean, you can do this in your home with a room right now. I mean, they're renting out all sorts of things on Airbnb. So,
Brad,
yeah.
can I say one thing? We are starting Airbnbs. It might sound like we're doing quite a bit, but you know there are five partners involved. But with that being said, we didn't want to learn Airbnb whatsoever, and this could also be another thing that you know everybody can make money on. We're actually paying a property management company.
Yep.
He is a realtor, and we're paying him 25% of the gross just because we don't even want to learn it.
Yeah.
We rather somebody else learn it, run it, and do everything and pay that 25% to somebody else because we have so many things going on.
Well, and the more you go onto YouTube and just start researching how do I make money on Airbnb, believe me, you'll get inundated. What Matt's describing is one way. So that what he's describing could be you. So you could be hired out by somebody to manage the nuts and bolts of an Airbnb and take, you know, in Matt's case, 25% of the profit. So you don't need to really expend any income to make money in the Airbnb space. The other way is what they call rental arbitrage. And what this is if you, the most common way is you pitch to apartment buildings because they're never 100% full, that you want to lease out an apartment unit or one or more, and you're going to use it for short-term rentals. Okay, so you essentially sign a lease with an apartment complex for whatever it is, $1,500, $1,800, $2,000 a month. Yes, you are bound to that lease, but you will likely be making more money if you rent it out on a nightly basis. Now, there's a lot there, right? I mean, you're going to have to talk to, I mean, for every 10 companies that you talk to, 8 will tell you no. I mean, we all know that in our own leases from Trek, it says you can't sublet. So, you know, you're going to need to create a value proposition and explain to them why this is a better deal. There's also a market for this when it comes to industries like pilots coming to DFW or Houston or you know, some of these major cities that are, you know, here for 3-4 weeks at a time to train as pilots. There's visiting nurses. There's all sorts of, there's people visiting hospitals for treatment. There's all sorts of kind of lower risk clientele that this does work for. Now, I will tell you that rents are steadily going up, and this is becoming a little bit more difficult to do. And I think that the margin on an apartment complex is not as great as if you just pitch to a single family landlord, but there is money to be made there. And then think of it this way. I mean, Airbnb, I mean, think of how many hotels are in how many cities and towns. There's lots of experiences out there to the public. You do not have to do one thing. You know, a lot of people like to start small with campgrounds, and you can rent out a tent, you can rent out anything. Believe me, people will pay for it. All right, and so things to consider. I like Airbnb because it's a low barrier to entry. Doesn't cost you, could not cost you anything. You are in the hotel and service business. So think about what the housekeeping process looks like, what the guest complaint process looks like, check in, check out, security, all that stuff. And then choose a location that's near a major city and has things to do. Okay, so you are minimizing the risk of being specialized. And so if you're near a major city, or you're near a hospital or near a university or near some kind of recreation, well, then the chances are greater that you have greater occupancy. So just in my experience, and if y'all have ever gone to an Airbnb, you might be able to attest that the weirder, the better, right? I mean, people who are going on vacation are typically not getting apartments. They are getting a weird, funky, yurt or teepee or, storage container that's converted to a home. I mean, again, the weirder, the better. That is gonna, in fact, Ellie, I think you're on, you had one of these storage container that she couldn't get filled fast enough. So it is a very viable option. All right, next is RV parks. So with the pandemic especially, there are lots of RVs out there. There is huge demand for RV parks. If you look at any kind of YouTube video on commercial real estate, they will tell you self-storage, RV parks, multifamily, and mobile home parks are where you should be concentrating. And as I said earlier, people are not just looking at these as destinations. They do have those. So think KOA campgrounds, or there's another one called Jellystone. Those are more experiential, but there are plenty that are no more than a half acre of land that is, pebble-sized gravel with septic tank, water, and electricity supply. And people are either using that for a stopover to somewhere else, or they are using it as alternative housing. So these parks can be very self-sustaining, especially if they are monthly rentals. There's not really a whole lot you have to do. If it is large enough and you're not real close, it is in your best interest to have someone living there, but not a requirement. You don't need a lot of land. You can fit a lot of these things onto a good half acre, and they can bring in a steady rental income between $350 to $550 a month. Could be more if you're renting by day of week. They are easy to evict. All right. They are a hotel guest. They are not like someone that has signed a lease and you have to go to court. Okay. Because essentially you are just renting out the dirt and the utilities. Okay. And so from there, if you want to create a better experience in hopes of getting more revenue, more occupancy, great. But that is kind of what you're doing. So things to consider is if you're going to buy one of these, it is far better to buy one than develop one for all the reasons that we've been talking about. But so if you're going to buy one, remember these and self-storage facilities are by and large owned by mom and pop operators. And things to consider are the age of the park, meaning the infrastructure. So if the septic tank is old, and those things have a life cycle, by the way, you just don't put them in and forget it. They're good for 20, 25 years. The faucets, you know, are they prone to freezing? Electrical units, all that. And then the age of the RVs that you're going to allow on the site. So, you know, you're the owner, you're the landlord, you can determine what your park rules are. You go to some of these parks and they look horrible. And that is a direct reflection on what the owner is tolerating at that point. And so it doesn't have to be like that. You can make it whatever you want. And then do you want to take long-term guests versus short-term guests? There's some things to think about there. But this can create some pretty steady income. Self-storage. So the good news is you got no tenants, really. No one's living there, right? But it is a lot lower monthly rental income. So if you know you go out to some of these more rural areas, which is kind of where the deals are, the good news is they're cheap. The bad news is the rental rates are low. So for $50 a unit, you got to get 8 of those to make up a $400 a month RV park space. Okay, so it's something to consider. Okay, they are more expensive because there are structures on that land. Okay, so typically when you're buying an RV park, there's nothing there. I mean, yeah, you got utilities, but that's not a structure. That's not an improvement. So they tend to be taxed a heck of a lot less, and they're less expensive to buy. The reverse is true for self-storage, okay? Because there's structures on there, okay? And then a lot of that stuff can be automated. The check-in process, checkout process can be all done remotely. So it is somewhat easy to systemize and make some money at. Okay. Next is mobile home parks. So here's the deal with mobile home parks. Many towns aren't allowing any new ones. Okay. They don't want a mobile home park. They want a $700,000 Toll Brothers home. Okay. And so like storage facilities and RV parks, a lot of these are owned independently. And so there are 2 ways to go about this. You are either buying the park and renting the land. And so that would be the owner owns the mobile home and they are renting land from you. And that is the plan, by the way. There's that is what happens in a mobile home park. Even if you own the mobile home, you're paying someone to be there. Okay. And so you are providing roads and utilities typically, but you are just renting the land. The other way is you own the mobile homes and you're renting them out. So lot rent is what they call it. If the owner owns the mobile home, it's about, I don't know, $350 to $550 a month, depending on where you are. But rent on a mobile home is $1,100 and up, I would suspect. And so it's much more lucrative to own the actual home and rent it out, but you're a landlord again. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. All right, I already mentioned about the towns owned by mom and pop. All right, the neighbor app. So the neighbor app is something I've mentioned before. Just go to the App Store or the Google Store and download an app called Neighbor. And Neighbor is the app version of self-storage. So if you think of Airbnb, but for self-storage. So if you some people rent out a room, some people rent out half of their garage, some people rent out a shed. If you're like me, a couple of months ago, I rented out my driveway. You can make some extra discretionary income off of doing this. This is renting out those spaces to people to store things. Okay, so you're not going to get rich off of this deal. You need to have a lot of these to really make it worth your while, but it can be, as my son told me, how can I make money by doing absolutely nothing? And my answer was, well, some guy can park his flatbed in my driveway and I can collect $69 a month. And so you can do all that on this app. Okay. The last time I mentioned this, one of the realtors reached out to me and said, thank you for mentioning this. Didn't know about this before. We actually have some land and I'm starting to do this. So it can be done. So let's let's analyze a deal. And this is where, Matt and Jeff can kind of keep me honest here. So I have a couple of deals I want to go through. I'll just kind of go through my mindset. Okay. So first we're going to look at both a buy and flip and a buy and hold. So I'm going to go to an area of the DFW area that I know is rental friendly, and that is the city of Carrollton. And I came across this listing today. I'm going to point out what I would look for. And this is a townhome, and I wouldn't necessarily walk down this road other than it went from 2049 to 192. So they're motivated. And then if you scroll down, it's been on the market for almost 2 months, and it says investor special. Okay, home being sold as is, cash only, great rental opportunity, great. Seems to check all the boxes, all right? So, but let's see if this pencils. So I'm gonna go to a mortgage calculator. And it was 192, I think it was. Let's say I can get this thing for 180. They seem motivated. Okay, so we're going to put down $36,000 because that's 20%. And to JC's point, I'm going to put that right at 4.5%. Loan terms 30 years. Property tax, I'm going to say is, actually, that's probably low. I'm going to say it's probably, now let's just say 4,500 bucks. Home insurance policy, 2,200 a year. That's probably somewhere in the ballpark, and I'm going to calculate. So all in, I am going to pay roughly $1,287.96 a year. And so the interesting components of what I just did is that I included taxes, I included insurance, everything, all right? So let's just round that up to 1,300 bucks a year because something's gonna happen, right? So let's go back to the MLS. So remember what I said before, I gotta know what I can rent this thing at, okay? So I'm gonna go to, I'm just gonna write down the zip code. And this is, by the way, a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath at 1160 in square footage, built in 1973. Okay, so that's something to be concerned about, maybe, maybe not. So I'm going to go and search for leases. And I want to just see what's leased. In this zip code, and you're going to want to take a much deeper dive, but let's just see what, because 2 bedrooms are specific. So I'm going to whittle it down there, and I'm also going to say this is a condo or a townhome. Okay, so in the past 90 days, 7 of them have rented. And if you look on the far right, the rental rate ranges from $1,495 to $1,850. So another exercise I'm going to do is I'm going to click on all these, and I'm going to do a quick CMA. And I'm going to say, I'm going to look for what is the average price per square foot I can typically get in this rental. And the average is about $110. Okay, now remember, I'm sorry, $1.57. But just to give you a frame of reference, it was $1 like forever. And ever since the housing shortage, it has gone up. So let's take a look at that. Let's just hedge our bets and say, I can probably get $1.60 per square foot. It's got 1160 in total square footage. That brings my potential rental to 1856. Let's see if that makes any sense whatsoever. So some of these are in that range. This one is at 1850. It sat on the market for 32 days before it rented, but this one sat for 101 and it was less. So my guess is that the older the asset, the more difficult it is going to be to rent. So if you want my opinion, I would probably ratchet that down to probably $1,600 to start, because I don't entirely know what the rental market's going to do. But let's just say I can get $1,600. Let's go back to my numbers here. And what did I put? $36,000 down. My payment is $1,300. I can get $1,600 for it. That's going to be a $300 a month return. So that's $3,600 a year. So here's where the fun part comes in and where the rubber meets the road. Let's assume you didn't have to rehab it at all. You've already written a check for $36,000 to buy it. So is this going to be enough to make it worth your while versus just giving your money to a financial investor and having it grow without you having to worry about broken pipes and fixing the roof when there's a hailstorm? The 3,600 divided by 36,000 is 10%. Okay, so is that enough to make it worth your while? What say you, Matt and Jeff? Would that be enough to pursue that deal?
So my thought process is a little bit different. It's more about building wealth and assets. So I also look, but the answer is yes. And it also depends on the investment strategy. If somebody has capital just to put down and see their capital grow and doesn't want to, put it in the stock market and wants it in a good asset, then absolutely, that's why we have a lot of hedge funds paying over market for properties, because they are using leverage as well. So with just the 10%, just based off the rents, absolutely, it's a good investment because you're also going to get the appreciation and the principal pay down. So, and this is like you're showing one way of doing rentals, which is still a great way.
Yep.
Yeah, I would just put one more caveat on that. Looking at the age of the asset, from a contractor's point of view, this particular deal I might tend to kind of shy away from because of the age of it. 1973 was right when everybody was changing over from cast iron to PVC, and the first iterations of PVC weren't that great. There weren't any fittings in PVC yet. Everybody was still using cast iron. So I would think that that's probably why this thing is been on the market for a little while, because it's probably got some issues like that. So yeah, if you've got some money that you need to park in real estate, this one, if you look at the asset, it's already 50 years old. So life expectancy of a property is about 50 for a residential home. So I would expect that you would have to put some money in this to give it new life. So I guess for me, I would shy away from it just because I kind of think of it more in terms of what it would cost to make it a no hassle asset.
Yeah.
And Jeff's correct. Like a lot of the properties that we buy are highly distressed. So even like at this age, we're already replacing a lot of things that Jeff's talking about. And then it's a different investment strategy. We're buying them at deep discounts, fixing them up, and then pulling 100% of our money out, if not more than that. So we have no money in on the deal, so they're infinite returns.
And then Marco mentioned that there's one thing we forgot to factor in, which is a townhome or a condo, or really, well, maybe even most single family assets are going to have an HOA component. And he mentioned it was $1,200 a year. So you're going to have to factor that in as well.
And Brad, one thing that I would add is I look at market rents very lightly when it comes to the MLS because a lot of stuff is rented off market.
Right.
For instance, on my own rentals, a lot of the rentals we own, um, I stopped sticking for rent by owner signs in the front yard because everybody's just that calls on a rent by owner sign is sticker shock. I mostly just pay the $10 a week on Zillow, and I'm typically renting our houses $400 to $500 over MLS market rents. I just rented one yesterday out for $900 over market rents. So they're
Outstanding.
moving. It's just supply and demand right now.
Yeah. Outstanding. Yep. 100%. So the exercise for buy and flip is not going to be dissimilar. And instead of looking at market rents, you're going to want to look at, you know, what's sold in the area and see how much money you put into it and how much money you can stand to sell it for, and whether that rate of return is going to be worth it. So I want to look at one more. I'll get rid of the residential, and I'll just show you one that I've looked at recently. And this is a commercial asset. So this is an RV park, and it's in Springtown, Texas. There's several others near there. So there's a fair amount of competition, but you can still make some money. They want $479.9 for it. It's on 3 acres of land. It currently has, and it's owned by an 85-year-old woman and her son. And it has 12 spots, and 11 are rented at $400 a month. Okay, so here are a couple of ways I approached this. Is that I did look back at, since this is in the MLS, I looked back at other RV parks that have sold and tried to determine, based on the number of spots and the amount of acres that were there, how much each spot sold for, each pad. And so it ran from a low of about $17,000 a spot to $26,000 a spot. If she's got 12, then she wants $40,000 a spot. Now, here's the thing that I always think about in commercial real estate, is that this is income producing. This is a business. And there are, all the 12 spots are on like the first third of the land. The other 2 acres are open. It's beautiful. And the son happens to be an RV park builder, and you know he could definitely build this park out with another 16 spaces, but it isn't what, that's not what it is today. And so typically when you're valuing a business, you're not, I mean, just watch Shark Tank, right? I mean, you're not paying for what it could be, you're paying for what it is. And so when I take a look at, and she gave me the expenses, okay? And so let's just do some quick math. So it's $400 a spot times 12 spots, and let's say they're all rented. That's $4,800 a month. And let's say we get lucky and they're rented 12 months out of the year. That gives me a gross incoming revenue of $50,000, $57,600. Okay. Now, like many RV parks, that rent includes utilities. And so between paying that and paying for trash service and paying for internet and the other various expenses that go along with an RV park, and although there aren't many, it's about a 40% expense ratio. So for this 57.6, you're going to take home 60% of that. That leaves us with $34,560. Okay, so let's go to a commercial mortgage calculator and see if this makes sense. Let me just look. I'm trying to move my There we go. So she wants 479. Whoops. 9 for it. Right. And 20% is going to be 95,980. Some traditional lenders will want 25. But let's just use 20. And it is also at about a 4.5% to 5% right now. And they're going to amortize that over 20 years. Just FYI, it's not a traditional 30-year deal. Okay. So my monthly payment is going to be $24.28. So $24.28 times 12 is $29,136. So where did I say I was making 36? So I'm roughly taking $7,000 a year home as a profit. So the cash on cash for an asset like this, you got to factor in what your mortgage is. If you just did what they call NOI or net operating profit, that's not enough. I mean, that would have been great, $36,000. I would have taken that all day long, but you're going to have to pay your mortgage. So $7,000 divided by the, what, 95,000 roughly I had to put down. That's a 7.4% return on my investment. So, not, I mean, close to kind of what you'd get from a financial advisor, but not quite there. But I mean, like Matt said, it just kind of depends on what your long-term strategy is. The issue, the only way I'm going to make money is if I then pay more money to build out those other spots. So, you know, is it worth $479.9? Probably not. Probably not. I mean, that return on investment as it exists today is probably not worth it. So the rents are going to either have to go up or she's going to have to come down in her price. Now, when you look at other RV park assets in the area, there are others that are more in the ballpark. So, I mean, this is not an end-all, beat-all formula, but at the end of the day, I had to write a check for $95,000. I'd want to see more than 7% return. And I don't want to deal, I certainly wouldn't want to, it's not enough for me to have to evict people and, you know, do background checks and things like that. So that's just my personal way of looking at it. Now, I ran through that exercise because it is an example of an income producing asset. And so that goes for whether you go out and buy a Pizza Hut, an RV park, a Dunkin' Donuts, or, you know, somebody's taco stand that, you know, the owners retire and they just want to sell it. It's got to make money. You got to pay money in order to get a decent return back. So this formula can really be applied to any kind of commercial asset like that. So any other input or other approaches? I know we're over our hours, so I mean, I'll hang out. That's cool. But I wanted to get other people's perspective if they had any other different approaches. No? Okay. All right, cool. Well, I hope I gave you something to think about. I appreciate Matt being on and certainly Jeff as well, and Marco and Ken. So a lot of you guys have some real deep experience in doing this. And so, you know, all that to say that, and Matt will attest to this, it is far better to have a real estate license than not, if you hope to have some of these doors open for you. There's just a lot of time you can save and a lot of tools you have access to that you'd have to rely on somebody else to get for you to be successful. So as always, if you guys have any questions or want to go deeper on this stuff, on any one or more of these, feel free to reach out. But again, thank you guys for hanging in, and we'll see you guys next Thursday at 1. Have a good Thanksgiving, by the way. And we're not meeting next Thursday. I'll be eating turkey and watching the Cowboys. Cheers, guys. Thank you.